Hello and welcome to the March Revenue Estimating Conference. I'd like to call the conference to order. I am Michael Buslow. I'm new here, so bear with me as I try and work through and replace the shoes of Dave Roederer. I want to first start by giving a special thank you to Legislative Services Agency for making this meeting happen virtually. Really appreciate it. Worked with them yesterday and today and to make sure that this is seamless for the public. We will also be going through and sort of today estimating the revenues for the state of Iowa for fiscal year of 2021. We will also look at fiscal year of 2022. And be taking our first look at fiscal year of 2023. So I was given notes and guidance from my mentor and friend, David Roederer, and as part of that, a lot of this might sound familiar, but we'll go through a little bit of what we're doing. And for the folks who are joining us for the first time, I promise not to belabor this, or for the veterans, I promise not to belabor this. And for the folks here for the first time who are probably eager to get to the 11:15 tip-off for March Madness, I promise also not to belabor this. But the Code of Iowa establishes the Revenue Estimating Conference as a 3-member panel. Holly Lyons joins us from the Legislative Services Agency and is their branch representative. Dave Underwood, who is joining us virtually, also in shirt, tie, coat from his living room, is the member of the public in the state of Iowa in general. And Governor Reynolds has appointed me as the governor's appointee from the executive branch. The conference is required to meet at least 3 times a year. And the conference is required to reach a consensus on a number, not a range, that cannot be exceeded. All 3 members of the conference independently develop their projections. I think all of us would like to thank our partners at the Iowa Department of Revenue as they provide that data to support us as we go and work to create our projections. We also gain our information from a variety of sources. I can speak to that and specifically to whether that be Moody's Analytics, my folks at the Department of Management, folks at other departments who are in the business of collecting revenue, as well as friends and family in business throughout the state to get anecdotal evidence. And Department of Revenue, obviously, for that current activity. The governor was required to submit her budget that she submitted to the legislature using that December revenue estimate. Dave would lovingly call the Revenue Estimating Conference Christmas party. We then now meet in March, and the legislature is required to use the lower estimate between the December and March RECs. The state budget and our state accounting is based on a fiscal year, meaning the first month of the year is July and the last month of that fiscal year is June. So as I mentioned earlier, today we are looking at fiscal year 21, the current fiscal year we're in, and updating the estimate for that year, which started July 1 of 2020 and ends at the end of June in 2021. We'll also be looking at fiscal year 22, the budget that's in front of the legislature most predominantly. We will be reviewing our estimate for fiscal year 22, which starts this coming July 1st of 2021 and ends June 30th of 2022. And then finally, the last 12 months that we'll be estimating of the 27 total that we'll be looking at will be our first look at fiscal year 23, which begins, let's see if I get my dates right, July 1st of 2022 and ends June 30th of 2023. And so with that, I will move to the REC agenda and entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Lyons and seconded by Mr. Underwood. All in favor say aye.
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 Carries unanimously. I now entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the December 2020 meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Underwood, seconded by Ms. Lyons. I will now open, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And I will abstain from this as I didn't take part in that meeting and was not a part of it. So the motion still carries 2-0. Well, at this point, and before we go into reviewing the fiscal years, I will yield the floor to Holly and then Dave for their comments on the economy.
All right. Thank you, Michael, and welcome to the REC. It's good to have you here. It's been 14 weeks since our last meeting, and we all continue to emerge, adapt, and evolve from the COVID-19 pandemic. But as I stated in December, COVID-19 has most likely forever changed the way we live, work, spend, or invest our money. There has been much progress in the rollout of the vaccine, reducing the number of cases and allowing the relaxation of pandemic-induced restrictions. The economic impacts from COVID-19 are also moderating at both the national and state level, due in large part to the tremendous influx of federal money in the form of pandemic relief programs and stimulus payments. Since we met in December, there have been 2 more rounds of stimulus checks for qualifying individuals, extended unemployment insurance benefits, and other federal assistance, with the most recent stimulus plan approved just last week, so the impact of that stimulus remains to be seen. At the national level, economic growth rebounded sharply, but employment remains well below pre-pandemic levels after robust growth last spring and summer. Lower wage jobs in states that rely heavily on the leisure and hospitality industry were exceptionally hard hit. There is much pent-up demand for spending, travel, services, and entertainment. The big question is how quickly people will return to pre-pandemic activity. And of course, the risk is a resurgence of the virus or new variants that can't be controlled with existing vaccine, resulting in a significant reduction in consumer activity. Some economists are concerned that the pent-up demand for spending may fuel inflation, and recent market activity indicates that longer-term interest rates are on the rise. While rising rates are sometimes a sign of an overheating economy, they can be a sign of new life. After years of extremely low interest rates, some inflation and additional economic growth expectation should be welcome. As to short-term rates, the Federal Reserve continues to indicate that it will act to ensure borrowing costs do not climb too quickly in order to support economic growth and stability. Turning to Iowa, the economy has been remarkably resilient to the COVID-19 induced recession, largely because our primary industrial sectors are manufacturing, finance and insurance, and agriculture. And those sectors were not as vulnerable as the service sectors. That's not to minimize the impact on that sector, however. That sector was hit hard. Unemployment continues to disproportionately impact lower wage workers, and many of those are in the service industry and not able to shift to work from home status as workers in other industries have. While job recovery in Iowa was swift after the initial downturn and up through last August, recent months have seen a slowdown in job growth. I liken it to riding a bike downhill, down a very, very steep hill, and immediately going up another hill. As you hit the bottom of the hill, the momentum carries you partway up the next hill, but then you need to start pedaling to get up the hill or you'll stall. We've slowed down and we're not close to the pre-pandemic job levels yet. Our employment recovery curve looks like a backwards check mark, where the desired shape would be more of a V. We have to hope that the vaccines, stimulus money, better weather, and pent-up demand will accelerate job growth. In the non-farm employment series, Iowa is currently 77,000 jobs below January of 2020, and over the past 3 months, we have added just 3,700 jobs. At that rate, it will take many months to catch up. In the household employment series, through January 2020, through this past year, Iowa is 117,000 jobs below January of 2020. And over the past 3 months, we have added just 6,400 jobs. This job series includes laborers, independent contractors, maybe Uber drivers, and other service industry employees that don't appear on a surveyed business payroll. Job growth must accelerate if the situation is going to improve quickly. But we've discussed this before. Iowa's employment to population ratio has been dropping and is now near the record low level experienced during the farm crisis of the 1980s. As an explanation, this ratio is the number of people reporting that they are employed divided by the population age 16 and older. In Iowa, it is likely that many of these people are older or retired or for whatever reason don't want to work. It's also possible that workers have left the job market during the pandemic for other reasons, childcare or schooling or business closures, and one can hope that they will return and fuel job growth and in turn revenue. Some positive news, corn and soybean prices are increasing and our expectations are that prices will remain higher than recent years, and that's a good thing for Iowa farmers. Iowa's budget reserves are full and healthy compared to many other states, and this gives Iowa better options for dealing with the pandemic and economic issues. The dangers or additional risks I see is that after this last round of federal stimulus checks and extended unemployment payments end, if employment has not recovered enough, the economy will falter in the second half of 2021 or early 2022. But that's a danger and not an expectation. There is a lot of pent-up demand for services. So like December, the path ahead is still uncertain. Turning to the numbers, the LSA is cautiously optimistic in our fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22 estimate, as we note that the year-to-date net general fund receipts collected through March 18th are strong. The LSA estimates reflect a modest 2.5% growth rate in fiscal year 21 and a slightly higher growth rate of 3.6% in fiscal year 22. For fiscal year 2023, we remain optimistic and estimate a more normal growth rate of 4.2%.
Thank you, Holly. Mr. Underwood.
Yeah, Holly did spend some time talking about employment levels. But what remains is something we've talked about for quite a while. There's a lot of jobs out there that are available in Iowa. We just don't always have the right people at the right locations. But I still, in discussions with employers, find about half of them would hire more people if they could find them. There are certainly jobs that are available from anywhere from entry level to the upper professional levels. Just a matter of some of the people that are unemployed in Iowa, which our unemployment percentage is fairly low, would consider maybe a new profession. So they might not go back to work at a McDonald's or a Target retail store. There are opportunities in other professions that don't require advanced degrees. So, I mean, elder care is one area where Iowa has got plenty of opportunities for people to take advantage of. So I think that we could really bite into some of those unemployment numbers and decline in the non-farm job counts if people would just maybe be a little more flexible in what they would take on. One thing that we haven't spent a lot of time talking about that I think is going to impact our growth in Iowa is the supply shortages. That ranges from building materials to computer chips. It definitely is impacting manufacturing in Iowa and our growth potential there. Prices are starting to rise on many products. Steel prices are up a huge amount. They're complicated because of tariff issues, not necessarily anything else internally. So that's a federal issue that interferes with some of the growth that we could experience. Another example is typical new home construction. They're faced with very high material price increases equal to about $24,000 per typical home. Part of that is the issue of wood availability out of Canada into our supply chain. I know that some contractors they're sitting around waiting at the lumber yard for the truck to come in and hope that what they need is on that truck that day. I think one thing that Holly mentioned was the interest rates, particularly that kind of 10-year note rate jump. It was kind of a surprise, I think, to many people that that happened, and introduced kind of confusion into the financial world. Um, and then the Fed comes out and says, we're not going to change rates. So, um, that kind of thing creates confusion throughout a lot of industries. Another one that hasn't been mentioned yet is the Biden tax increase talk that has interjected again some uncertainty into the economy that our economy really didn't need an addition of any more uncertainties. And then I was just reminded yesterday that our land borders with Canada and Mexico are still closed. The announcement came out that well into April, I'm not going to be able to go fishing in Canada again. I'm worried about August. Uh, I've got my week scheduled, but it's we lost last year. So, that's going to impact a lot of people as that continues to be closed. Family reunited even is part of an issue with those type of closures, both going north and south from both of our borders. So those kind of uncertainties that Holly alluded to in some of her additional items are something that I guess lends caution to my approach to the next 2 fiscal years.
Thank you, Dave. I believe that the notes of plotting our persistence and steadiness are right. I also can only echo the comments made regarding the uncertainty and challenges that lie ahead into the great unknown again. What I would say is, as an overview, Iowa's economy has been resilient, persistent, and if you look at the numbers that are presented today, shows revenue growth for the state of Iowa year over year. That really meshes well with what the Council of Governments and KPMG reported, that Iowa, along with Arkansas and Utah, are among the lowest risk and most resilient economies in the nation. And Iowa had the second lowest impact of COVID among any of the 50 states. Again, that strength is really shown, and depending on whose numbers we look at for fiscal year 21, $100 to $200 million of revenue growth year over year, despite a pandemic. Questions that were raised in December as I prepared for this meeting and went through the thrilling minutes of December and then listened to the audio that we at the Department of Management definitely keep for those tough nights at home of sleeping. Questions did come up, and they weren't novel questions. How will the economy look when it reemerges? How does the vaccine get distributed, and what is its effectiveness? And what will be the stimulus, and what will its impact be? As you recall, in December, the meeting was around the $900 billion that had not yet passed, let alone the March $1.9 trillion that just passed. I agree with my colleagues on the panel for the reasons for optimism, and really see it as an opportunity as a state to take an opportunity to further strengthen and augment our persistence, resiliency, and low risk with long-term planning because of the opportunity we have. But jobs in this state exist. Our unemployment remains low amongst the nation, and those jobs give Iowans confidence in our economy. That confidence is obviously buoyed by $1,400 stimulus checks that Iowans have received in the past days. Those checks will undoubtedly have an impact on our sales tax in the near term, this fiscal year. And that's reflected in our projections at the Department of Management and the governor's appointee for a higher sales tax than what LSA is reflecting. It also means that there's demand that will be driven longer term. As Mr. Underwood noted, as Dave noted, and as home builders have told me, last year was their best year ever in building homes, new homes, and they believe that this year will only be better. That's corroborated on a statewide basis by Department of Revenue economic forecasts, as well as on a national basis by Moody's, our economic forecasting partner and bond rating partner. Those new homes have to be filled, as we likely know ourselves, and filling those homes will lead to longer term receipts for the state for the sales of those durable goods that will undoubtedly come in. We also have to applaud the rollout of the vaccine in Iowa. The governor announced this week that beginning April 5th, all Iowans will be eligible for the vaccine. In fact, if you try and call a Hy-Vee today, you're going to see what does the wait list look like. There's not a ton of open spots because it'll be an on-demand, but really demand will outpace supply. We've already put more than 1 million shots in Iowans' arms, with more than 95% of our Iowa seniors, 65 and older, getting their shots. And we remain in the top 10 for shots distributed to Iowans from supply given to us from the federal government. And if you look, as Holly mentioned, in our strongest sectors, healthcare, manufacturing, and agriculture, these sectors have remained strong throughout the pandemic, in part because they're tied together, but also in part because of broader macro trends that we have seen from agriculture and therefore its impact on our manufacturing sectors. Additionally, that will only, in my opinion, be strengthened by the $4 billion of payments that are included in the stimulus for producers in the most recent March stimulus. And in fact, as you look at farming as a whole, with the prices that are up and the structure of crop insurance being pegged to that February pricing, profitability in 2021, I believe, can reliably and confidently be counted on, hopefully, cautiously. I've known enough farmers in my life that, we don't know what the weather is to come. And so I do want to be cautious, but that with that crop insurance piece can be counted on. But there are challenges that remain. Holly, you noted the labor market. In Iowa, we have been forward looking on this for some years, and Future Ready Iowa is in place that is meant to get those Iowans the skills they need to fill the jobs they want. In fact, if you look at Iowa Works and the Iowa Workforce Development website just today, 65,000 jobs are available. Top employers are in those sectors we've sort of discussed: Unity Point, the University of Iowa, which includes UIHC, Hy-Vee, Love's Truck Stops. As the nation begins to supply everything, there's going to be people that need to work in the service industry for that, and for MediaCom. And obviously broadband remains a very broad topic here at the Iowa Capitol. Additionally, there's questions on, while we do roll out the vaccine, what is the timing of that rollout and then its impact on our economy? While we do begin the rollout on April 5th, as I say, there will be some needing to meet the demand and supply questions that exist. And as that looks, when is the vaccine effectively then going to be distributed to Iowans? And then when does that impact our economy? From my opinion, that looks closer to late June. And then finally, and both of you had noted this, but I think it's worth saying, the uncertainty that exists around the supply and demand. On the supply chain, manufacturers tell me, and from the notes I've seen, shipping containers are going at a multiple. That they can order the goods that they need or the machinery and equipment that they require, but the tough part is getting that machinery and equipment to their factory here. Additionally is the demand. In addition to these strong transfer payments that existed to augment farmers in the trade challenges that were maybe faced in early 2020. Foreign partners in Iowa as an export state, foreign partners played a major role in driving crop prices in Iowa. Questions exist regarding that Chinese demand. Now, ultimately, the Chinese cannot grow enough soybeans and pork to feed their people. They will have to buy it somewhere, but will that somewhere be the United States? I believe that we are insulated in that for this coming crop year, but it's that longer term question that will be played out on a geopolitical level, much broader than the Iowa legislature. And so I remain, like my partners, cautiously optimistic. I think the questions that exist between us differ on the timing and impact of our current fiscal year more than our out fiscal years and how that looks and works going forward. As I said earlier, our job today is to look not only at our current fiscal year 2021, but the next fiscal year of 22, and then to finish our 27.5-month viewing or projection, we will look at fiscal year 2023. So with that, if you don't mind, I will do my best to go through the numbers in a Dave Roeder-like fashion. Yeah, it's a high bar. So for the new and uninitiated, which I count myself in that group, please pull out the revenue estimating conference sheet. We should pull this up on your screen for you. Our handy partners at the LSA are doing so as we speak. So with our IT partners, I don't get to make the joke that Dave makes, which is to say you should be looking at the revenue estimating conference titled sheet dated March 19th. And if that's on the bottom of the sheet or upside down, you're in the wrong place. Dave also had a note for me here that it's along these lines is when I get my calculator out. I think he did that for dramatic effect. I won't do that. I would use my iPhone for that. As you look at the revenue estimating conference, you'll see 3 sets of numbers in columns. So that first set, which looks at REC, and it's in a box, it's 4 columns that run north to south, the REC fiscal year 21 estimate, the percent change from fiscal year 20 to 21, the REC fiscal year 22 estimate, and that percentage change from fiscal year 21 to 22. Those are the December estimates that this conference made a few months ago and agreed upon. The next set of numbers, the next 4 columns, then are the Legislative Services Agency's estimates for today, March 19th, 2021. And if you look, there is that LSA fiscal year 2021 estimate, which carries down and has the net receipts plus transfers estimate for fiscal year 21 of $8,128,900,000. And carrying through with 2.5% growth, a fiscal year 22 estimate of $8.4 billion with 3.4% growth year over year. And then the final set of 4 columns are the columns of governor's appointment. They come from the Department of Management. Again, they follow that same format as LSA's. Our fiscal year 2021 estimate, the percent change from fiscal year 20 to 21. The governor's appointment, fiscal year 22 estimate, and that percentage change from 21 to 22. On the far right side, then, you'll see a set of numbers that compare the difference between LSA and the governor's appointment. Now, Dave was not often criticized for being optimistic. I tend to be a bit more optimistic than Dave, and LSA in this case is more optimistic than I. But if you look at, to look at these numbers and sort of understand how they work across the sheet, look at the personal income tax line included under tax receipts. You'll see first that in fiscal year 19, what our actual receipts were for those personal income taxes from Iowans. The impact from fiscal year 19 to 20, you'll see that there was a decrease. And then the 21 estimate, our current fiscal year estimate from the REC in December. If you follow that across to LSA's column, their number for those personal income tax receipts for fiscal year 21, again, that's the fiscal year we're currently in, as well as for the governor's appointment. And if you look, that's $5,265 million for LSA, $5,254 million for the governor's appointment, or a difference if you go to the far right side where LSA is higher than Department of Management by $11.3 million. So I believe I've covered how to cover the sheet. I hope. I studied a lot of Dave's notes for that. Holly, you'd be the expert for me. Did I miss anything? Thank you very much. At this point, I believe it is the time on our agenda to look and move. Oh, that's right. No, Holly, you would like to go through the balance sheet.
Yeah, well, just the backside of, well, if it's on the screen, it's not the backside, it's now what's on your screen. But for us at the table, it's on the backside of the spreadsheet that Michael just explained. When there's a federal law change between the times we meet, and there was, we met in December, then two federal law changes regarding stimulus. We reflect those on the backside, but those numbers are in our revenue estimates. They've already been included, but this is just kind of more of a transparency and an understanding of this is how the numbers are spread amongst these line items. So.
Thank you, Holly. Well, with that, now I believe our agenda, we can move a number and look at the numbers for review fiscal year 2021, general fund estimates, accruals, refunds, school infrastructure, transfer, and lottery and other transfers.
Just one comment. We have something kind of unusual that shows up in our numbers for the current fiscal year and for the past actual. And that's down a little beyond halfway of the lines. That's a accrual line, because our tax receipts above that are basically cash receipts. Whenever it's deposited, that's when it gets in there. And last fiscal year, we had that unusual change with the delay of when tax returns had to be filed, and April deadlines were moved out into a new fiscal year. And consequently, accrual line, which is normally a relatively small number, jumped for the first time in the last 20 years that I've been looking at these numbers for. So fiscal year 20 jumped to $307.7 million. What happens is that was just a delay in receipts that really belonged in fiscal year 20, therefore the increase in accruals. And that money was actually received or deposited in the current fiscal year. And that's why in the estimates have a negative 307.2 in our December estimate, which pretty close to the same numbers LSA and the governor's appointee used in their estimates. So just in round numbers, $300 million. That kind of messes up some of those percentages that we look at when we go through the individual line items. For instance, LSA's estimate on personal income tax was showing 13.2% this year, in the current fiscal year. And for next fiscal year, their estimate is showing a negative 2.67%. Well, a large part of those accruals, which are a negative number down below, are included as cash receipts on the top line. And so just caution when people are looking at the percentages. A lot of those percentages move around. Some of the sales tax percentages really would not be changed because of that, because they weren't a significant part of the accrual impact. Corporate income tax, that did have some significant numbers that would be down below, kind of hidden in that accrual line. So that's why we really need to, if we're talking about percentages, looking at the bottom line where that accrual impact has been taken out and washed out in effect through these numbers. So just a clarification for some of us and a reminder for me that that's included in there.
Thank you, David, for explaining that. I'm glad you did that. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, I guess I'll make a further comment then relative to the fiscal year 21 numbers. The difference between the two of you is shown in the second to the last far right column is $103 million. So somehow we need to reconcile those two numbers. Fortunately, yeah, in the next fiscal year, we don't have that large of a number, but we're well into the current fiscal year. We haven't seen anything that is going to significantly disrupt what our numbers are based upon. So it's just a matter of wrestling between the two of you, that 103 million.
I agree, David. And $103 million in an $8 billion budget is what, less than 2%, which is certainly within forecast error. So it sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but when you see it with the other larger numbers, it's really not that much different. So I don't know if you want me to get things started. I can entertain, or I can put forth a motion, or
Maybe we move one of the
one
numbers.
column. Yeah,
and-
our number crunchers over here like us to do a column at a time. And if we start with, I would move the LSA numbers for fiscal year 21.
It's been moved, and we need a second. But I do think what we do is, and again, bear with me, this is my first meeting. We can move the numbers, second the numbers, and then amend those numbers. It would be my thinking. And,
That's about what I was ready to get to. I will second that so we can have a discussion.
Very good. So we're looking at the LSA fiscal year 21 estimate. And the numbers there, again, to Holly's point, 100 million here, 100 million there is a lot of money, but 100 million in the scope of a $8.1 billion budget, we're in the smaller percentiles here. The biggest areas of divergence between the governor's estimates, our estimates, and LSA are really on the corporate income tax and refunds. Now, I think if we were to move those down from your estimates slightly, let's say 25 and 25.
I was actually even gonna go a little further than that, but that works for me.
Where would you go?
I was gonna propose that we, no, yeah. Did you say 25?
Of both of those.
I was originally looking at the DOM column. So give me just a moment here.
Mhm.
Backtrack. Yeah, that,
So
So
we're looking at increasing refunds by 25 million and decreasing corporate income tax by 25. I can work with that.
So it'd be roughly 800. Well, so on the corporate income tax line, by adding 20 or taking away 25 from your number, that would be $834 million. And then looking at the refunds, and we would increase those. So that's money negative to the state, but back to the taxpayers. So that's why it's an increase rather than a decrease. So that would be roughly $1,232,000,000.3, which
Roughly.
would get us then to net receipts plus transfers of $8,168,000,000.
8078.9.
8078.9.
That work? Okay.
8,078,900,000 receipts for fiscal year 20.
And a percentage on that, Jeff?
1.9% increase.
So a 1.9% increase. Feel comfortable with that? So at this point, do we need to remove that number, or is it it's the number as amended?
The number is amended, fine with me.
So number as amended is moved by Mr. Underwood,
Second that?
seconded by Ms. Lyons. All in favor of 8,078,900,000 as the number as amended, say aye.
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 Aye. Very good. That carries unanimously. Moving on to fiscal year 2022, general fund estimates, accruals, refunds, school infrastructure transfer, and lottery and other transfers. So this, as Mr. Underwood noted, there's much less divergence between the
Right.
two columns. $23.7 million. LSA is higher than the governor's appointee. As I was talking through my forecasts, I sort of talked myself into your forecast for fiscal year 22. I got more and more optimistic as I read and talked. Um,
I would like to suggest that we start with the LSA number and reduce the LSA number by $60 million and taking all of that out of the personal income tax line at the top. Bringing
So
the
you-
net total in to 8.3, let's see, 8,349.3, I believe.
Yes, yes, David, that would be correct.
And that percentage would give us an increase of
3.3%.
so that would be my motion.
David, so you're for fiscal year 22, less optimistic on how those receipts play out throughout that year than either
Right.
LSA or us.
Correct. Because we're starting with a smaller base. So by reducing the base amount, our percentages of growth that you would reflect would be pretty close to the same. Because the LSA growth was projected 3.4%, starting with a lower base, coming pretty close to that 3.4% growth rate. At 3.3 instead of 3.4, so that's rounded percentage.
That's where, as I look at the overall numbers and the growth percentage side and sort of the middle number of that growth percentage, I see the economic impact for me is going to be most from the 1.9 trillion and the vaccine felt in fiscal year 2022, I believe. If there's real robust growth to state revenues from wide vaccine adoption in the state of Iowa and from the transfer payments that are coming, whether it's to producers or just to state and local governments, for example, the 1.4 billion that is revenue replacement with asterisks and not a part of this estimate. I think that's an important note.
Right.
None of those numbers are being included in this estimate from the ARP, the American Rescue Plan Act. That 1.4 is still, months away from being distributed to the state and then understanding how it can then be sort of spent. So I see that impact, I guess, because of the timing and the Treasury regulations as being more of a fiscal year 22 bump downstream. And that's what gives me maybe a little bit higher optimism for the growth in state revenues associated in 22 than maybe where you're at, David. And really why I would probably, whether the LSA number or our number, which aren't too far, stick with those estimates sort of as noted.
David, what if we took off 45 million instead of 60?
Well, I'm not going to miss lunch over $15 million, so that's fine.
We're starting to really split hairs, but just in the interest of.
If we do that, Jeff, what do we have for numbers?
Your bottom line net receipts plus transfers, 2022 would be 8,364.3 with 3.5% growth.
I'll make that my motion.
So that would be taking 10 million, 15 million from the personal income tax line off of the LSA number. Is that right, Holly?
Well, it really, Dave's original motion was 60 million off of that line item, so I would just assume now 45 now. Yeah,
So it's,
and in the end, it really, yeah,
it took 45 off?
yeah, is that too much? That's,
Instead of 60.
Sorry, I thought it was just take 15 off.
no, well, it was changing, I was reducing Dave's reduction by 15 is what I was trying to do.
I've got that. Sorry.
Maybe Dave would go the other way. Maybe we could reduce it by 45 or 15.
I guess as I think through that, my feeling is we could, instead of reducing it by 45, reduce it by 30. And then what I would also add is I would say that I believe because of what I mentioned on home sales and the economy, sales taxes, boosting that by 15. Fiscal year 20. Receipts. Yes.
Well, in Holly's numbers, she's already got sales tax up 3.9%.
Yeah, maybe that's naivete of youth on the council. The other piece obviously is
I guess I was pretty comfortable, getting in that 3.5, 3.4, 3.5% increase, fiscal year 22 over 21. I think, even though we're coming out of COVID, it's going to take quite a while to work some of these numbers in and really get into significant increases in personal income tax, being that really for the next fiscal year of 22, that's really ending for personal income taxes to a large extent, except for withholding, at December 31st of this current calendar year. So those tax returns are going to be filed based upon earnings in this current year. I think, we're faced with some real challenges yet in the first 6 months of this calendar year for a lot of the businesses and the challenges that they're still facing. So even though I'm optimistic that I was going to continue to grow, I think a lot of that when it comes to personal income tax is going to be reflected to a half extent on the current calendar year tax returns to be filed next year. So the withholding continues on regardless. So, but the estimate and final payments will tell the tale. So.
Yeah, and I guess that's where I'm a little bit more rosy on what the fiscal year 2022 is going to look like because of that, seeing the 4 billion for producers, the 1.4 billion that is revenue replacement for the state, another $1 billion plus for ESSR for schools that has less restrictions from the ARP Act. That money coming down, I do believe will have positive impacts in fiscal year 2022 for the state and state revenue. And so that's where I see the growth, really being steady. To your point, Dave, I really do believe that and recognize that the business challenges that exist, but the steadiness of Iowa and persistence of Iowa's economy means that there's, I think, a little less rocky of that path going forward than what other states might face. And that's what sort of gives me that confidence, in the numbers and something closer to what was already proposed by LSA or us, aside from fiscal year 21.
So just refresh for me, if the number we have right now, we had voted on for 21 is 8078.9, 1.9.
Correct.
We went with the LSA estimate with, maybe we may need to move some things around, but what would our growth rate be? 3.5 or?
So the number that I proposed was as adjusted, or Holly's change from 60 to 45 is 8,364.3. The governor's estimate was 8,385.6. So basically $21 million under your original estimate. Is all. I'm comfortable with that number.
I am also okay with that. We could also go with the original DOM column 22. It adds back 21 million. It doesn't really get Dave to where he wants to be. So, but it's more of a, if we're $23 million different, or we were when we came in here for 22. If we take 10 million off of that, but again, we're really getting down to minutia and splitting hairs at this point.
Well, since I didn't get a second on any of mine, I'll have to wait till somebody else makes a motion.
Dave, are you more comfortable with the distribution of the governor's appointee column for fiscal year 22?
Just from a sales tax standpoint, yes.
I would propose a substitute motion. I don't know, is that what we do?
I think you can.
And I would propose that we would, I would move the governor's appointee FY 22 estimate column. The whole column. Does that really mess you up though? Wait, this gets me in trouble. You'd rather work off of LSA. Never mind. Okay. This is exactly what he told me not to do when I'm doing it. Right, okay, so we just, okay. Yeah, I want the bottom line. I want the bottom line dollar amount, the
Okay, the difference between the two numbers for
Right.
next fiscal year is 23.7. So I
There
take
you
that 23.7 out of sales and use tax, and that gets you to the final same number. How's that?
perfect, thank you.
We use LSA minus 23.7 coming out of sales tax.
And that would have you at 8385.6 and 3.8% growth over the 2021 number you've agreed to.
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Holly has moved and David Underwood has seconded the governor's appointment fiscal year 2022 motion. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Guys, one more time, what's that number?
3 or 8. So the fiscal year 2022 estimate, which if you're following on the revenue estimating conference sheet, the bottom line is going to be 8,385,600,000. If you're following row by row, which God bless you at home if you are, the delta that's going to exist, the change that will exist there is decreasing. If you're looking at the LSA fiscal year 2022 estimate column, it would be decreasing the sales and use tax number, is my understanding, by 23.7 million. So instead of 3.4225, this is going to, it would be 3.398 change. So that is fiscal year 2022. Now we take our first look at fiscal year 2023.
There's quite a bit of difference there. I guess we might have been optimistic.
Triggers.
Oh,
So our estimate took into account
the triggers.
that Senate File 247, both triggers were
Okay,
hit.
and ours did not.
With the numbers adopted, we hit the revenue, but come just short of the growth triggers.
Growth rate. Got it. And basically that growth rate is, we just kind of went with what a decent year is, the average decent year. And that's kind of the best we were hoping for, is that in 23, we're getting back to normal.
And so there will be the growth rate, and for those watching at home, there are a number of triggers in effect with the tax cut, Senate File 2417 that was passed, where there needs to be a revenue target and a growth in revenue by a percentage. That target on the percentage growth is 4% for seats. And that 4%, obviously, we are right at that number. 3.8% is what the RAC agreed on. And so it's by law just shy of it, but again, very close. I mean, you're talking, I think, probably less than $20 million of change in an $8.4 billion budget. So if I do the quick math on what our number would be, Holly, give me a second.
Sure.
I believe we think that the implementation would be rough. It would be, so putting that back in. We get closer. And again, your estimate for 23, like in 22, before taking into account 21, your estimate in 22 was about $22 million more optimistic than what we had put forward. Yep. So it's the same basic percentage. So it's about, so yeah, we'd be happy with your number as much as ours.
I would move the LSA number for fiscal year 2023.
Second.
It's been the fiscal year 23 estimate, and if you're looking at your sheet at home, it's the very, very bottom. You'll see a fiscal year 23 estimate. On the left side, the $8,762,500,000, that is the LSA estimate. The right side, that is the Department of Management estimate, but it took into account Senate File 2417 being implicated. It looks like that would wait till in this estimate until fiscal year 23. But it's been moved and seconded. The LSA fiscal year 23 number of $8,726,500,000, moved by Ms. Lyons, seconded by Mr. Underwood. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. What percentage is that?
David, it's 4.5% for 2023.
And David, that's sort of where I get back to why I, again, would think that smoothing of growth would be between 22 and 23, both closer to that 4% number. Next on our agenda is fiscal years 21 and 22 gambling revenues transferred to other funds and interest earned on reserve funds transferred to rebuild Iowa infrastructure. Again, looking at your revenue estimating conference sheet at the bottom, in between the fiscal 23 numbers, but below the columns for fiscal year 21 and 22, there are the two rows that say estimated gambling revenues deposited to other funds and interest earned on reserve funds. As you move across under the LSA estimates and the governor's appointment estimates, they match and we have a consensus that both sides sort of agree on that those numbers match. So I would move the numbers as reported on the sheet. We
Okay.
can move the LSA numbers out of preference.
I would second that. I just have one question. I noticed that revenues were down considerably in 20, obviously due to the pandemic, and I guess it's a big jump. I hope we get there. Casinos are open now, I think.
They are.
I think that
Yeah.
should be. Okay. I second it.
So the LSA numbers for the estimated gambling revenues deposited to other funds has been moved and seconded, moved by myself and seconded by Ms. Lyons. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Numbers carry unanimously. So to recap, the revenue change from the December estimate, overall, the number becomes for fiscal year 21, 8,078,900,000, 1.9% growth. And the revenue increase for fiscal year 22, the overall number is now 8,385,600,000, or revenue growth of 3.8 or 3.9%. We will work at LSA and the Department of Management to revise this sheet to adopt those numbers accordingly, and that will be then posted on both websites. Our next regularly scheduled meeting, and last year there was an extraordinary meeting because of the coronavirus, so I so hope no one in the meeting today will take this personally, but I hope we don't see you again in June. Our next regularly scheduled meeting will be in October, with that date and time to be determined. So I just would like to end with thanking again Director Craig Paulson, Robin Anderson, Tony Girardi and their team at the Department of Revenue, Matt and Dalton from the IT team at LSA, Jeff, Holly, you and your teams, Joel Lundy and Tammy Winters from Department of Management, and my colleagues, Mr. Dave Underwood, who joined us virtually today and is heading, I believe, to a basketball game after this, and to you, Ms. Lyons. Thank you for making my first meeting go as smoothly as it did. So thank you very much. And with that, I would adjourn. Thank you.